How many people were you expecting, Alan?
Two had let us know they were not going to be able to make it.
So 24?
Yeah, Joe Collier and Kathy Trainer.
Okay, 24, and then there's 6 of us on, so that would be 30, and we're at 27, so we're still missing 3. I think we're pretty close, so I'm going to share my screen to get started. Can a thumbs up if you see the presentation? Thank you. So let's see, last time Dan kicked it off, and unfortunately Dan is still in a meeting right now, so he'll be joining us anytime on this. But welcome everyone, Happy New Year. I hope everyone did have a good New Year. This is our first time meeting this month for that. As before, this is being recorded and it's also being live streamed, so welcome to anyone that is watching it on live stream right now. I just have one housekeeping thing to put up so that way people have time to do that. Anyone that is watching from home, if you put your phone, if you go to camera and put your phone up to this QR code, it will lead you to a Google form, and there will be several of us that are monitoring those questions throughout the night, and we'll make sure Alan and Deb has time to answer them when that is there for that. If for some reason this doesn't work, we also have a link that is located on our joint webpage for Fort Edward and South Glens Falls, and you can get to that joint site either on the South Glens Falls website or on the Fort Edward site, and it'll take you there for all of that. So we are excited to continue the conversation this evening. We wish it was in person, but we know in the abundance of caution, we've moved everything to virtual in both districts, including even some of our classrooms right now. So one day at a time, one step at a time, and each day will bring us to a new place. For those of you that are on the call from Fort Edward and South Glens Falls, good news was today was the first day for vaccinations for the 1B group, and anyone that works in a school, regardless of the title, is eligible. I just sent out actually to my staff, University of Albany has thousands of appointments, which is a good sign for us. So if you can't get one around here, take a look at University of Albany, and then if you choose to, you can get vaccinated down there. So that's my public service announcement, Alan, of the night. I have to, do at least one of those, or else I don't feel too good about myself. So I'll turn it over to you.
Actually, I think I'm gonna kick it off, and okay. I would like to add my welcome to Christine's. Also wishing you a happy New Year, and hope that you had a safe and enjoyable family or a holiday with family and friends to the extent possible. So I would like to start by just going through the agenda that was sent out to you a little bit ago, and just noting, I guess, that this is our 4th of 6 committee meetings, so we are well through the content, I guess, if you will, part of those meetings. We tried the breakout groups last time, and people seemed to really like it, and we certainly valued the feedback that we got on the transportation discussion. So if you've looked ahead, you'll notice that we're going to do that again this meeting. So since we are virtual tonight, we had a tour originally planned for South Glens Falls Middle School. And I think depending how the rest of the meetings play out, if we can do the tours, we will. If we're virtual, then obviously we'll all work together in whatever way we can to try to make some version of a tour available for those committee members that would really like to do that. The next meeting in February, we are going to kind of roll all of this together and talk about the finances. And I think you probably have already, but you'll continue to see how one of the sessions builds upon the next. So finances is the last session with new content. And then in April, we'll reconvene, and Alan and I, in the time between February and April, we'll have prepared the draft report. That the first people to see that are the committee members. And again, you'll have the opportunity to make sure we've gotten the factual data correct and to comment and discuss any of the other content that's within the final report, draft final report. So moving on to item 3 in the agenda, just a review of the notes from the December 21st meeting that was sent out. I actually have one thing that I want to correct that you'll see corrected here on the slides in a couple minutes. But at the end of the notes where we have the questions that were discussed in the breakout groups and the comments we tried to record and capture. One of the questions that was, what additional information would you like, was about the Fort Edward transportation aid ratio. My comment in the notes is incorrect. The actual aid ratio is 0.900. So that is corrected in the PowerPoint tonight. So other than that, are there any other comments or corrections from the notes? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the next slide, which begins the PowerPoint piece. So of course, I just said to Alan, this was working really well. And I cannot see, I'm gonna go ahead because I cannot see right now. I cannot see Christine's screen that she shared with PowerPoint, but I have my version here and I'm gonna trust that until somebody tells me differently, you're seeing it as well. So the slide that's up right now would be the timeline for the study merger process.
Yes, Deb, we are all seeing that.
Okay, great. I'll deal with it once I switch over to Alan here in a couple slides. So this is the timeline that was actually created by the State Education Department. As you look down through here, you'll see that we are in the middle, that we're between the second and third bullets. We're working on the study. All of the notes, if you haven't, or maybe you've seen them and didn't know the names, but all of the notes are copied to the staff at the State Education Department that works on the mergers. And therefore, they are kind of following along, if you will, as we go through this process. So going back to the slide, you'll see that the study is completed, as we just talked about with our committee schedule. The study is completed. The committee's last meeting is April 12th. Alan and I will take the feedback that you share with us then. We'll fine tune the draft final report and it will then go in May to the State Education Department. And just as an aside, we just completed last month that process with one of the other merger studies that we're working on. And believe me when I say that the State Education Department reviewed it in great detail. They care about the information that's in there. They asked questions about it. And it was a very thorough 2-hour process. So at that point, June 1st, the study is presented to a joint meeting of the Fort Edward and South Glens Falls school boards. And once we make that presentation, our work as consultants and the study consultants is officially complete. That's not to say, of course, that if there's subsequent questions later on, we would be happy to participate and to do anything we can to help the process. But officially, that part of the study, if you remember back, I think Alan talked about the study phase and then the voting phase. So the study phase is complete with that June 1st presentation to the board. At that point, we kind of hand it off to the BOCES superintendent or the district superintendent. This is the state role that the district superintendent plays. And so Jim Dexter is the representative, if you will, of the state education department for this process. And he will shepherd the group, the two communities through this process. So you'll see that June 1st to September 30th is public information and discussion. And this really is, we say discussion, this is a lot of listening by the school boards, because remember, the school boards at this point have not yet voted to put this proposal in front of the two communities. So this is getting information out there. That's already ongoing. I know all of you are talking to people, asking questions, hearing thoughts that have been shared with you, all of that. So that's not something new, but it's now that the study is complete, that draft study will be shared. It won't be draft at that point. The final version will be shared, but it will give people a chance to see the information and think about it and ask their questions and so on. Then on October 6th, the boards will meet and decide whether or not they want to put the proposal in front of the community for a vote. And as you may remember early on from the discussion about the process, the Fort Edward School Board will vote separately. The South Glens Falls School Board will vote. And if either one of those boards choose not to go any further, then the whole process stops at that point. So that's on October 6th. November 17th is the date the state has established for assuming that both boards approve, that November 17th would be the date for the advisory referendum. That would occur in each district separately. The votes are calculated, counted separately. And again, if it fails in either Fort Edward or South Glens Falls, then the process stops there. So if the votes are both positive, then lastly, it goes February 9th of 2022 to the community again, and separately Fort Edward, separately in South Glens Falls. And depending on the outcome of that last vote, that final vote, the district, if both are positive, we've gotten through all to that point, both votes are positive, then a new district begins operation July 1st of 2022. There's really, and those, should it get to that point, there will be, that's a very busy few months between February and July. And there will be a lot of activity, a lot of input from various stakeholder groups, and a lot of work gets done in that time period. So that is the State Education Department's calendar. We've been waiting to get that from them so that we could share it with you. And there it is for your review. Moving to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit just quickly to review meeting takeaways from the December 21st meeting. These 6 bullets are what we gleaned from the December 21st meeting. So if a merger were to occur, 2 elementary sections could be reduced. Attendance rates for the 2 districts, this was a question that was asked by the committee, are very similar. Recommendation is to maintain Fort Edward as a K-5 elementary school and consolidate all students in the South Glens Falls middle and high schools. Many Fort Edward students would be provided with transportation to school, depending on the South Glens Falls transportation policies. Student riding time, bus capacity, and student residence distance from school are all factors in establishing the bus routes. Some would be new, some would be modifications to existing, I believe. And lastly, there would be additional transportation costs in a merger, but the approved costs are reimbursed through transportation aid at 70 cents on the dollar. One of the other things that I wanted to mention here too is that as we get questions from committee members, and we do appreciate those questions, the responses that we give, Ellen and I are trying to make sure that we share with the full committee. So you may be seeing some of those emails come out in between our meetings, but I just wanted to mention that we're happy to take the questions, and then we will share our responses with the full group. So on the next slide, just some follow-up from the December 21st meeting, and this was really a part of the breakout group. And so I thought it would be a good idea to take that last question, which was, is there any information that you would like to have about transportation that was not discussed tonight? And do my best to respond to those things with input from the various districts. So the first one, what are possible?
Christine, can you change the slide, please? There you go. Sorry,
Yeah.
Deb.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I'm not seeing it, so thank you. First bullet, what are the possibilities for the current Fort Edward vehicles? The owned vehicles, Fort Edward currently has a couple of older owned vehicles and a couple of newer leased vehicles. The owned vehicles could be sold if the district still has them at the time of merger. They may have gotten rid of them given that they have some age. And as far as the lease buses go, possibly the buses can be turned in early on the lease. Or I believe it's possible that South Glens Falls, who owns all of their fleet, could purchase could purchase them at the end of the lease. I would certainly want to be sure that there was exploration about any implications on transportation aid if, with those various lease options. So that would be a factor to look into before any decisions would be made on the vehicles. They would become the property, just like the buildings, the property of the South Glens Falls district. How would after hours transportation for students involved in interscholastic athletic or co-curricular activities be provided? Right now, there isn't any specific to those things, with the exception of, as we mentioned last meeting, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. There's a 3 o'clock. I think it leaves the middle school at 3, high school about 3:15. But other than those buses, there is currently no after hours transportation. District could decide to do something differently, but that's the way it stands right now. This is the one. Fort Edward transportation aid ratio is 0.9. Impact of parents dropping off students at school on bus routes, would that then if parents are doing that, would that then lessen the number of students riding buses? It certainly would if more parents are in fact doing that, but you would need to, I think, assess that at when you get to that point. And as I said before, the new bus route discussion that we had at the last meeting really, I feel, is the most conservative approach. And if there were more parents bringing kids, then maybe it's not 3, maybe it's 2, or maybe it's something that looks different. But that would really have to be assessed at the time that bus routes are established, as they typically are in the summer. And lastly, I think the question, if I understood it correctly, and if I didn't, please correct me, but is there any impact on contracted bus maintenance costs related to the bus cameras? We talked about the bus cameras that are on the current South Glens Falls fleet. And I did ask that question of the staff there, and the district has a service contract on the cameras. The cameras are owned by the district, and that service contract, so logically there's a cost to it, provides each camera, and there were 6 on each of the large vehicles, provides that the cameras are checked to be sure they're operating correctly 3 times a year, and monitored that way. So those are the follow-up items that I wanted to share with you. And as I said, we appreciate the input on the questions from the transportation section. So Alan, I think with that, I'm going to hand off the presentation to you for the staffing piece, and hope I can figure out how to get slides back.
Any questions on what Deb said before I start, or? Okay.
Can I just hop on real quick? I'm sorry, I tried to raise my hand in the chat. I don't know if it worked. I do have a question about the final report draft. I know we have that meeting on April 12th. Is there a typical timeline with regards to, because I know it's quite a hefty 100+ page document. Do we typically have that like a week in advance to review? Is there a timeline as far as when we would anticipate?
We try even more than that to get it out even more than a week, because for all of the reasons you just laid out. Yeah. If we can, and I think there's usually few changes. So, obviously we have it done when we share it with you to that extent. And then, yeah, we try to get it out at least 10 days.
Okay. And then the one other question to that is, I know after that meeting is when it goes to state ed for review. Is there an anticipated submission date for that? Like, would we have about a week after that meeting? Is it 2 weeks? Just because sometimes after you have conversation and kind of process things, then there's sometimes some further thoughts maybe that could get shared. Is there a timeline with regards to when it actually would get submitted to state ed?
We would, I'm sure, given it says May on their timeline,
yes.
The sooner we get it in their hands, the better the odds are that we stay on schedule, and the better job that they can do in reviewing the report on their end. So again, having just gone through it with the other districts we're working with, we were actually ahead of the prescribed date, and that was helpful in that process. But yeah, I mean, if we meet on, I think it's, the 12th? Yeah.
The 12th, yeah. So there could be like a week cushion anyways.
Right. So there should be plenty of time there for, if we all agree, look, give us a week to process the discussion from the 12th, and then, do whatever on our end, we'll do what we need to do. And it should easily be able to get it to the State Education Department May 1.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, then I'm going to take over from here. As you can see from the slides, tonight's conversation is specifically about all of the staffing issues involved with school districts. But there's even a broader approach for tonight. When Deb and I started working with this study, at the very beginning, we said, for the first few meetings, you're going to feel like we're just providing you with a whole bunch of information and data. And by the time we get halfway through the study and to the end of the study, hopefully there are going to be some connections that are going to start to be made. And we hope tonight you'll begin to see some of the connections that will be made in the study and that have come from conversations that we've had in previous meetings. So specifically about staffing, but hopefully some connections as well. This is a big deal part of the chapter because of the study, because this chapter on staffing is significant in that it is about real people. It's about people's lives. It's about people's careers. It's about people's jobs and their families. So it's a very personal part of the study. In addition to that, it's a big part of the study. Schools are very people-intensive organizations. Routinely 70 to 75% of any school district budget would be devoted to staff salaries and benefits. So, and we'll see some of those numbers tonight. But this is a big deal because there are so many people who work in school districts, and that takes up the major expenditures in any school district budget. So that's where we're headed tonight. The next slide is where we start with every meeting, and that is reviewing the statement of assurances about this topic. You'll remember that the boards agreed on these assurances prior to the study beginning. And I know there's a lot of words on this slide, so I've highlighted, bolded some phrases to kind of help us pick out the main ideas. You can see right at the beginning, one of the things that the boards are interested in is providing employment for as many staff members as possible. That kind of speaks for itself. And in the event that there are not going to be able to provide employment for everyone, the boards want to use retirements and attrition to accomplish the goal of keeping everyone employed that they possibly can keep employed. So that's an important statement. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the evening. The second bold section, which is the end of the first bullet, says that the Fort Edward employees will be compensated on the South Glens Falls salary schedules in accordance with their years of service in the district. And so that's kind of a guarantee that the people who are currently working in Fort Edward, when they get, if a merger occurs and they get moved over to the South Glens Falls school district, they will be credited with all of the service credit that they've had as Fort Edward staff. The next bullet is that sick leave, accrued sick leave will be carried over. So people from Fort Edward who have accrued sick leave, if they go to South Glens Falls, that sick leave will go with them. The next bullet talks about them getting health insurance. And then the final bullet, final bolded bullet, talks about any South Glens Falls faculty who are hired will be placed on the salary schedule, the South Glens Falls salary schedule, based on their years of service. And you'll see how that plays out in the future, in the future slides. So again, employment for as many people as possible. If it doesn't work, we'll try to use attrition. People get service credit for their time in Fort Edward as they go to South Glens Falls. They carry their sick leave with them, and there'll be health insurance waiting for them. Those are the assurances that apply to what we're going to talk about tonight. So the next two slides are really one table out of the report, but it became too small to see. And the next two slides really just kind of lay out the types of positions that these two school districts have. Now, this is a snapshot, like all of our data. This is a snapshot at a point in time. You know, there may be a teacher aide added tomorrow. There may be a teaching assistant reduced the next day, whatever. Again, we've got to remember we're looking at kind of big picture stuff. And so this is the data from the two school districts with respect to the names of the positions and the numbers of people in each position. Again, first slide is the one that you're looking at here. And before we switch, let me just point out for you that something that is not terribly surprising, but again, important to understand that most of the employees in these two school districts by far are teachers. 58% of the staff, 44 out of 76 of the staff in Fort Edward are teachers, and 265 out of 500 staff members in South Glens Falls are teachers, 53%. So both more than half. If you include teachers, teacher aides, and teaching assistants, it's over 70% of the staff in Fort Edward and just under 70% of the staff in South Glens Falls. So nothing surprising there. School districts often hire the majority of the staff to be employed as close as possible to students. And so when you look at the three titles of teacher, teacher aide, and teaching assistant in these two school districts, like virtually every school district, the vast majority of people are working closest to the student. So Christine, if you can that's the first slide. The second half of this table is right there, where you can see that the total staff at the bottom, there are about 76 staff in Fort Edward and 500 in South Glens Falls. And again, we see where most of the people are. Again, that'll be important in a minute. Okay, the next slide, and this is also a split slide. This is the first half of it. This is another large table. One of the things that merger studies are required to show is a comparison of the teacher contracts in the two school districts. Not that it's, to see if there are huge differences in the agreements or if they're fairly similar. First of all, we should understand that no two teacher contracts in New York State are the same. They're all different, and that's appropriate. Each school district recognizes a teacher union. That district negotiates a contract with that teacher union district by district. They always are different, and that's the way it's set up in New York State. There's nothing wrong with that. So as you go through the particulars in these two tables, you'll notice that they're different, and that's not unusual. They're all different. Let me point out a couple of things. First of all, the Fort Edward teacher contract right at the very beginning expires on June 30th of 2021. So this coming June. And the South Glens Falls teacher contract goes out to 2025. So different expiration dates. Again, because this is an annexation, essentially the staff in Fort Edward, if a merger occurs, would be moved over to the contracts in South Glens Falls. My guess is there would then have to be some type of negotiation to fine tune that contract in order to accommodate people from Fort Edward. Very difficult for us to predict what that might look like. Obviously, it's negotiations, but the base document is going to be the South Glens Falls Teacher Association contract, probably with some tweaks when that document is having to accommodate all the Fort Edward people. Again, to eyeball this, as you go down, both contracts deal with arbitration for the grievance procedure that you see next. Both districts are with the BOCES Health Insurance Consortium, although there are different contribution rates. Both districts have buyouts, both districts have dental insurance, both districts have sick leave, and you can go on and on and on. And I'm not gonna review every clause. And again, the particulars of every clause are not that important. The question is, are they pretty similar or are they drastically different? And I would conclude that they're different, but they're fairly similar. The one unusual clause in this document, in this slide, is the third row up from the bottom, where the base salary of all teachers in Fort Edward was reduced by $500 for this school year. Again, I've been doing these things for a long time. That's really unusual. So if there's one thing in these two slides that would be unusual, that would be it. And somehow that's going to have to be accommodated as we move forward. And I don't know how, but certainly that's a very unusual clause that I'm sure, given the financial issues that Fort Edward is facing, there was an agreement with the Teachers Association that they would certainly contribute to a solution by having their base salaries reduced by $500. That's unusual. The next slide, Christine, deals with, again, different topics. Again, they're somewhat similar. They're not terribly different. The two things that are different are the termination payments. Again, without getting into the details, you see Fort Edward has got a system, and the retiree health insurance payments, you can see that the details of Fort Edward and South Glens Falls are different. And so this is one of those things that might have to be tweaked. There are retirees in Fort Edward. What's going to happen to the retiree health insurance for the Fort Edward staff if there's a merger and they now fall under South Glens Falls? Somebody's going to have to figure that out. We don't have that answer. You don't want us to have that answer. You want that to be decided in your district, how those little tweaks are going to be accommodated. But again, the takeaway from these two slides is that the teacher contracts are different, but they're not dramatically different. But there are going to be some areas where, even though the South Glens Falls teacher contract will be the base document for hiring people, I'm sure, I would predict, there will be some form of negotiation that deals with the little adjustments that have to be made in order to accommodate all the Fort Edward staff. From there, we took a look more specifically at one of the contract clauses, and that is a comparison of the teacher salary schedules. So for those people who are not school people, community people, let me just take a half a minute to explain how this whole compensation system works. Both of these school districts have a salary grid that is used to determine the salaries that are paid to their teaching staffs. One axis of that grid deals with years of service, and simplistically, every year that a teacher teaches in a district, their salary goes up because they have been there for another year. So that one axis is number of years, often called steps in a salary schedule. The other grid for determining salaries is the degrees or number of graduate hours the teachers have. That's the second factor. So that for any teacher, if you say how many years experience does this teacher have, and how many, what kind of degrees or graduate hours does the teacher have, you can go to the salary schedule, look at the point where those two axes intersect, and that will give you the salary for that teacher. So again, big picture, years of experience called steps, and number of graduate hours are the two factors determining salaries. So the top third of this table that you're looking at deals with teachers. You see a B in front of that deals with teachers who have a bachelor's degree. These are teachers coming right out of college. B is for bachelor's degree. The middle third of the table, where you see the M, deals with those teachers that have a master's degree. A master's degree is usually 30, 33, 36 graduate hours beyond a bachelor's degree. Teachers have to have a master's degree in order to be permanently certified in New York State. So most of the teachers are going to be in that area with that says M for master's degree. The bottom third of the table deals with teachers who have gotten their master's degree, but then took an additional 30 graduate hours even beyond their master's. So they've probably got somewhere around 60 graduate credit hours. So that's how they get broken up. So let me go back to step one. If you're hiring two districts are hiring a teacher right out of college, never taught, no graduate hours, has a bachelor's degree, graduated from college in May, starting to teach in September. The Fort Edward is going to pay that teacher $44,685. Glens Falls is going to pay that same teacher $43,698. So this is one place where the Fort Edward schedule is a little bit higher. By the time you get to step 5, you can see that the South Glens Falls schedule is higher. And those are really the most important points of this top third, because people have to get a master's degree. So people don't have 15 years experience with a bachelor's degree. We just do it to fill out the table. The more important one is that middle third, where we're talking about teachers with master's degrees. So again, if we're looking at somebody coming out of college, but they stayed on for another year or two to complete their master's. So there's step 1, no experience, but they've got a master's degree. You can see they're going to start higher than if they had a bachelor's degree. In Fort Edward, they're going to start at $46,844. And in South Glens Falls, they're going to start at $46,997, a little bit higher. So if you look at the step 1s of any of those columns, what you find is that the salaries for the two districts are really pretty similar. But as you get into step 5, step 10, step 15, step 20 on these schedules, what you find is that the South Glens Falls schedule becomes significantly higher than the Fort Edward schedule. Master's degree, step 15, right in the middle of the table to make it easy, hopefully. Somebody who's got 15 years experience, teacher late 30s with a master's degree, in Fort Edward is making $62,664, but making over $7,000 more in South Glens Falls, making $69,757. So this is an important, and again, these are, I've just picked out every 5 steps, but it gives you an idea what happens in the salary schedule. What this means is, except for people starting with no experience on step 1, the South Glens Falls teacher salary schedule is higher than the Fort Edward teacher salary schedule. And that's the takeaway. We'll do specifics in a minute, but that's the big takeaway to understand. South Glens Falls is higher, okay? We next took a look at the average teacher salary. Here's the data from the 2 districts in terms of the payroll, the number of teachers, the average teacher salary. And what you see is that the average teacher salary in Fort Edward is $70,700, and the average teacher in South Glens Falls is $77,627, about $7,000 higher in South Glens Falls than in Fort Edward. And if you put them all together, you can see what the average salary is there. So the average salary for the 2 groups of teachers combined is $76,643. If you put all 309 people together, that's the average salary. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, and this is where the connections start, is in addition to teachers having an average salary of $76,000, the other thing that's really important to understand, and this may be foreign to people who are in the private sector from the community, is that fringe benefits in school districts represent, on average, for these 2 school districts, about 45% of payroll. Now, that would include the district's contribution to the health insurance premium, to dental insurance, to Social Security payments that the district has to make, to retirement payments that the district has to make, workers' compensation payments that the district has to make, unemployment insurance, any fringe benefit that a district pays on behalf of its employees. We ask the districts to give us numbers. And so the average fringe benefit cost is about 45% for these 2 school districts. So while the average teacher salary is $76,000, the average cost to the district with salary and benefits is about $111,000 per teacher. Okay. So people understand where those numbers came from? That makes sense? Everybody still with us? Yes? Okay. So that's the average. So from that point, you remember back to the statement of assurances. The statement of assurances said that if there's a merger, the teachers from Fort Edward get moved to the South Glens Falls teacher salary schedule, and they get moved to a point on that schedule that reflects the amount of service that they have in Fort Edward. So that master's degree teacher in Fort Edward, if there's a merger on step 15, goes to the master's degree schedule, step 15 in South Glens Falls. Everybody gets moved over right where they are. So again, putting some pieces together, South Glens Falls contract is higher than Fort Edward. The Fort Edward teachers have to be given credit for their years of service in Fort Edward for their placement on the salary schedule. So when you move the Fort Edward teachers to the South Glens Falls schedule, there's going to be a cost to do that. So I've taken a look at, I took all 44, 45 teachers, I don't remember the number, in Fort Edward, and I looked at their step and their graduate hours, those 2 points on the salary schedule. And I moved them from the Fort Edward salary schedule to the South Glens Falls salary schedule, step for step, graduate hour for graduate hour. And the difference in the two payrolls paying the Fort Edward people on the South Glens Falls schedule is $233,000 to do that. To move those people over is 233 grand. In addition to that, we added in another 20% for fringe benefits. Now, we subtracted out, again, ballpark, 25% for health insurance, because whether a teacher's making, you know, 40,000 or 50,000 or 60,000 or 70,000, the health insurance costs are the same. So even though the salary would go up, the health insurance costs would not. So when you add that benefit cost onto the cost of moving people to South Glens Falls, you see the cost to level up the Fort Edward teachers to the South Glens Falls schedule is just under $280,000. This is a really important number. This is one of the numbers that when Deb does the session next February, the next session in February, and she starts talking about where there may be savings or where there may be additional revenues or where there may be additional costs. This is one of those numbers that's going to be plugged in next month, because this is a new cost. If the districts decide to move, they have to come up every year with this $280,000 difference in order to move the Fort Edward teachers to the South Glens Falls salary schedule. So that picks up a couple of points out of the statement of assurances. So the next thing we looked at then is teacher attrition, because the question is, if there are going to be fewer teachers, remember that the statement of assurances says that the merged district will want to employ as many people as possible. And if they can't employ as many people as possible, they want to use attrition to reduce staff. It's another way of saying they don't want anybody to lose a job involuntarily. Same thing. So what we do with this table is we look at the number of teachers who have left the two school districts in the last 5 years. Okay. This table is labeled teacher attrition. Might be a little confusing. It doesn't mean that when these vacancies for 5 years came open that they were or were not filled. We don't know. Some of them may have been filled, some of them may not have been filled. The point is that when we're looking at attrition for the future, what we know is that at least for the past 5 years, 60 teachers have left teaching positions in these two school districts over the last 5 years. On average, 12 teachers leave the district every year for the last 5 years. Now, there's no guarantee that 12 would leave July 1 of 2022, but there may be 18 that leave July 1 of 2022. We don't know for sure, but the best we can do is to say, let's look at 5 years of history. Is attrition for the future a tool that might work? And given that all of these teachers have left, an average of 12 a year, the chances are pretty good. Now, some of these people may have resigned to go teach in another district. Some of these people in these positions may have retired. Some of these people in these positions may have been laid off. There are a variety of reasons for why these vacancies occurred over the last 5 years. But the bottom line is, on average, 12 people leave these two districts every year. The bottom line of this is that that we draw is that if we get to July 1 of 2022, and there are going to be a reduction in some teaching positions, this table tells us that there's a good chance, not a rock solid guarantee, a very good chance that any teacher whose position is reduced, it can be handled through attrition. Said another way, as I look at all this data, what it says to me is there's a high probability that nobody in either of these two districts is involuntarily going to lose their job. Everybody's going to have a job. on July 1, 2022.
Alan, we have a question from the group.
Okay.
Amanda has her hand raised.
I would just like to make a statement about the 1920 list for Fort Edward. I would like to just caution that or make people aware that attrition list primarily was drastic cuts that had to be made due to our budget being voted down. So when the terminology is that they left the district, that makes it sound like they may have retired or may have chosen to go elsewhere. There were some who saw the ship sinking, so they did leave on their own choice. But many of those listed on that 1920 list for Fort Edward were not by choice, and they were by cut.
Yes.
That number does skew it quite a bit. All five elementaries were cut. Not a single one of those left voluntarily.
Right. So yes, I would agree with that.
Just an
I
awareness.
probably said it too quickly, but all of the people on this list may include people who left to take a job in another district. They may have left because they retired, or they may have left because their position was reduced. There may even be other reasons, but yes, this represents all people who left. And yes, clearly some of them are from the people in 1920 that left because of the cuts. So, I mean, I think for me, the takeaway does not change drastically. People leave these districts every year. And, you know, if 5 or 6 of those were different, maybe it's 11 a year instead of 12 a year. But the point is, there's a good chance, and as I've looked at this data, there's a good chance that there's a great chance that nobody's going to lose their job, bottom line.
Alan, it's Dan. I'm just looking at the chat too. I missed the beginning where we assigned jobs, but it looks like Mary Ann Stark has a question. If you can address that.
Sure.
Mary Ann, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, so my question is, does that take into account if South Glens Falls already has an existing Pell list? Like if they already have people?
It does not. Do you, Christine?
We have nobody on our list.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sorry. Any other questions?
Can I piggyback on Mary Ann's question with regard to Pell list? Fort Edward does have a Pell list currently. Where does that play into this, or how does that play into this, or does that come later?
Yeah, so like my question would be like that as, does South Glens Falls take on our Pell list or only our active employees at that time?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that the people who are, I mean, you would want to call your school attorney to be 100%. I'm 99% sure that if there's a merger, the people who are on the Pell list and by the way, Pell, again, I'm sorry, community people, Pell means preferred eligibility list, means people who were involuntarily reduced from their position, who have rights to be called back to their job if a vacancy occurs in the next 7 years. That's what a Pell list is, preferred eligibility. I'm sure that list would go to South Glens Falls should there be a merger.
Dan, is that something that you could at some point just check with the attorney on, since they had said that would potentially be a district attorney question, or Christine or Dan? Just no rush on it, just curious where that would fall in the mix.
Yeah, we can. We use the same attorney, both school districts do, and I may have the answer to that already, Amanda. I just don't want to provide it until I have a chance to look at it. But I'm pretty sure the Teachers Association of Fort Edward asked me to look in that answer. I just don't have it on the tip of my tongue or right here in front of me.
No problem, just for a future reference at some point.
And then there's a question from John Guglielmo. When you're speaking of nobody, are you also including, are you speaking of just the teaching personnel is the question.
Probably not. We're going to get to the support staff and the administrators in a minute, but so far teachers, but I'll get to the others in a second.
Yeah, that was the last question in there.
Okay. Okay. So again, I'm probably going to put a new title on this in the future because it's about the attrition in the future, not the attrition in the past. I'll clarify that. But bottom line on this is a good news slide. I mean, everybody's always saying, am I going to lose my job if we have a merger? And, I don't see that happening, and this table is one of the reasons why. Okay, Christine? The next thing we look at is, is a chunk of money that school districts spend on coaching salaries. So we look at what the impact of that might be should a merger occur. And so this is the list of coaching salaries for fall sports and winter sports. You can see that both school districts have ranges based on the number of years of experience coaching that sport. Again, not to get mired in the details, but you can see that South Glens Falls has more sports than Fort Edward does. Everybody would expect that. You'd also see that while it's not huge, the Fort Edward salaries are actually higher than the coaching salaries in South Glens Falls. Again, not hugely higher. So these are the fall and winter sports. You get a idea about that. And then, the next slide is going to be spring sports, the same thing. So here's the question, how do you deal with this? And what our experience has been is that when school districts decide to merge, two things happen. Number one, some of the sports obviously are combined, and that can result in some savings. The slide that's up on the screen right now, let's start at the top. Both teams right now have varsity baseball coaches. You can see the range for Fort Edward. You can see the range for South Glens Falls. But should a merger occur, there will be only one varsity baseball head coach. So you could say, well, one of those salaries, they're pretty close. One of those is going to be saved. That's savings. And so you could go through this table of coaching salaries and say every place there's a duplication, let's count up how many duplicates there are and let's add up all those salaries and let's count that as savings if a merger occurs. On the other hand, when school districts merge, one of the things that we often find is that sports are added to the listing of sports that each district had in the past. They, number one, sometimes add new sports. Number two, they sometimes add new teams. If schools didn't have a JV team in some sports, sometimes after a merger, they'll add a JV team. They'll add a modified team. They'll add a freshman team. Whatever form it takes, new sports, new teams, new levels, whatever, it's not unusual for merged districts to have additional options for kids. That costs money. That's an expense. So here's where we are right now, and we'll be happy to accept some feedback on this. As we look at this table, we see, yes, you obviously could have some savings by reducing duplicate coaching positions. On the other hand, we think it's prudent to leave ourselves a little bit of room in case there are new sports or new teams that are created so that money would be available to hire and pay those coaches. Bottom line for us, again, when you're looking at numbers that are $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, knowing the kind of money that we're going to be talking about being at stake in this merger, we kind of, as I look at the stuff, I say, let's not include coaching salaries as a factor one way or another, savings or expenses. That the stuff is probably going to wash pretty close. And if it goes $10,000 up or $10,000 down, again, in the magnitude of money that I'm going to be talking about in a minute and that Deb's going to be talking about next month, probably not worth making a prediction about saving or spending more money on coaching. Okay, so The next group we looked at were administrative / supervisory / clerical support positions in the district. And you can see that there are different kinds of positions and the number of people who are in each of these positions. So here's the first answer to the question about we may have the opportunity for no teachers to lose their jobs involuntarily. Does it affect any other candidate, any other employees? And it does, because what we have right at the top of this list is we have 2 superintendents. And again, the reality of it is that if a district merger occurs, the new district will require only 1 superintendent. So there is potential savings by going from 2 superintendents to 1 superintendent in a merged district. Now, in terms of our conversation tonight and what Deb is going to share with you next month, the current superintendent in Fort Edward, that's Dan. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable. We hate to do this personally, but it is what it is. His contract runs through June 30th, 2025 with the Fort Edward board. If a school district merges in 2022, the merged district is obligated to honor Dan's contract through 2025 if he decides that he wants to stay. However, once July 1st of 2025 comes, his rights in terms of his current contract will no longer exist. And at that point, if not before, we will have the savings of going from 2 superintendents to 1. It's also possible that the Fort Edward superintendent will have another position before that time. And at that point in time, the savings might kick in earlier. But while we don't like talking about 1 person and 1 title, it's kind of hard to avoid it in this one instance. So Dan, with all sensitivity to you, it is what it is. And so that would be a place where some additional savings could accrue. Now, beyond that, I'm not sure there's a great deal of other savings. As I look at the superintendent secretary district clerk position, right now there's a 0.4 in Fort Edward and 1 in South Glens Falls. Could you go from 1.4 to 1 and save 0.4 of a secretary? Maybe, probably. The others that you look at, there doesn't appear to be a lot of duplication. Maybe the treasurer, deputy treasurer position, can you save something there? Maybe. But again, the kinds of the magnitude of the new expenses and the savings that we're talking about, probably not terribly significant. So as we look at this table, again, to estimate conservatively, because we'd rather have the district say, gee, they estimated we were going to save 200,000 and we saved 250. We'd rather have that happen than to have them say, they said we were going to save 300 and we only saved 250. I don't want to do that. So we're admittedly conservative, but as we look at this table, we would plug in savings as 1 superintendent salary as of July 1, 2025.
From echo dot number 2.
Okay. So then we go to the rest of the support staff. And again, we've done the same thing with the support staff contract that we did with the teacher contract. We've looked at duration and grievance procedures and leave provisions and insurance and vacation and retiree health insurance payment. We looked at the whole thing. And again, we find that they are not dramatically different. Again, they're different. They're always different. But that the Fort Edward support staff would be accommodated into the South Glens Falls support staff contract, CSEA contract. And, my guess is that they would, you know, there would have to be some additional, what I'll call mini negotiations to tweak any little changes that need to be made to accommodate all of those people that have been working in Fort Edward. But again, they come with all their service. So as you look at the vacation credit, for example, after 1 year, after 2 years, after 5 years, after 13 years in South Glens Falls, the Fort Edward people would bring with them all of their years of service, and they would hook right into the vacation schedule given their current seniority in Fort Edward. So I think much the same as the teachers. Different, not terribly different. Start with a support staff contract, CSEA contract in South Glens Falls, and then work out what you need to work out to accommodate everybody from Fort Edward. Okay, then what we did with the support staff was really the same thing that we did with the teachers, is we then took a look at the salaries that are paid in terms of largely in terms of ranges for support staff in the two districts. And what we find is frankly what we always find with support staff. There are a couple of things at play here. Number one, you can see that the listing of the titles are not the same in Fort Edward as they are in South Glens Falls. The districts call similar types of people different things. Number two, because they're located in different counties, they do have different civil service commissions. So that is another factor. You also find that there's a whole bunch of titles that South Glens Falls has that Fort Edward doesn't have, and you'll find some titles that Fort Edward has that South Glens Falls doesn't have. Again, also compared to back to our earlier chart, given the number of people who are teachers and teaching assistants, there are not a huge number of people in these categories. The Fort Edward salaries appear to be slightly higher than the South Glens Falls salaries. But as you know, as I look at this and think about moving the Fort Edward people over, I don't see, you know, I'm not going to go out and say that South Glens Falls salaries are lower for a typist, so they're going to cut the typist positions. I would doubt that's going to happen. I'm certainly not going to say that. But there doesn't appear to be any need to level up the salaries because the Fort Edward salaries are already a little higher. The bottom line is that there are far fewer people in these job titles. The salaries are much closer together. Fort Edward is higher. As I look at this, I don't see any opportunity to either save a lot of money or that there would be huge expenses to move people over to South Glens Falls either. So I kind of look at this as I look at the coaches. If somebody said, you know, you ought to put in 10 grand just to cover whatever may happen, I'd fine, you know, that'd be all right. But nothing jumps out at me as being way out of whack, the way that, not out of whack, being very different, like the teacher contract salary schedules were very different. So we then look at the staff efficiencies that we have been talking about really since our second meeting together. And here's what we think can conservatively be projected as some possible savings. We have talked, this is at our second meeting and a little bit at our last meeting, we talked about the opportunity to take a second grade class and a third grade class in Fort Edward and merge them and send a few kids from each grade level to Harrison. That would have the effect of reducing 2 elementary teachers. So that's what that teacher elementary number of staff 2 means. Remember from our earlier calculation, a teacher with salary and benefit costs $111,000. So our savings by reducing 2 elementary teachers is $222,000. the secondary teachers at our second meeting, you'll remember we went through all of the courses that were offered in both of the districts and all of the different class sizes, the different sections that were involved. And we talked about being able to reduce the number of sections at the secondary level. We said there could be 8 English sections reduced, 10 social studies, 11 math, and 11 science. Teachers teach 5-6 classes a day. So where we're going to reduce 8 English sections, we're saying we probably could reduce 1 English position. Where we're reducing 10 social studies sections, we probably can reduce 2 social studies teachers. 11 math sections, 2 teachers. 11 science sections, 2 teachers. So we got 1 English, 2 social studies, 2 math, 2 science. There's 7 secondary teachers that we believe could be reduced. The other category that we've talked about is effective July 1st, 2025. At the latest, we would go from 2 superintendents to 1, and that savings would accrue as well. So when you add all of this up with what we've done so far, and again, we continue to believe that we're being conservative. We have not reduced any teacher aides. We have not reduced any part-time bus drivers. We have not reduced any teaching assistants. We have suggested reducing just those positions that sections could clearly be combined in the name of efficiencies that the statement of assurance has talked about. And so we believe that this salary and benefit savings of about $1.2 million every year could be achieved just by making those consolidations that we've been talking about. So again.
So Alan, can I ask a question or just clarify something? Because this is where I kept getting confused.
Sure.
When you talk about the 2 elementary and the 7 secondary, this relates to your attrition slide. So you're not necessarily talking about people, you're just talking about positions.
Positions, exactly.
Okay, so those would be like 9 positions, but the hope would be that they're all done in the retirement phase. And that's
Exactly. Retirement or resignation.
Or resignation, right.
Right, yes, exactly. And that goes back to that table of attrition for the last 5 years where people leave. And again, they leave for all 3 reasons: resignation, retirement, layoff, involuntary layoff. Absolutely. But when you got 300 teachers or so, people are going to leave every year for a whole bunch of reasons. So the chances are, I think, very, very high that nobody's going to lose a job. I mean, these are good news slides. I'll tell you one other thing too. Let's say we get to July 1, 2022, and in fact our predictions are accurate that you can reduce 1 English position. But you get to July 1, 2022, and no English teacher is leaving. So the board at that point has a decision to make. Do we keep that teacher on, or do we involuntarily lay that teacher off? I will tell you, and again, I'm not guaranteeing this for any board, that most times a board of education that has a statement of assurances that says we want to employ as many people as possible, and we only want to accommodate position reductions by attrition. I think it's every time that I can think of, the Board of Education has said, let's keep that teacher on for a year or 2 years to see if we can have that savings materialize, because the state is going to give us a big chunk of money that Deb is going to talk about next month as an incentive to merge. And we've got the money. Let's keep the teacher on, that English teacher on. And again, nobody loses a job. I mean, I don't, again, I can't guarantee it, but I would be very surprised if, as a result of all of this playing out over the next year and a half and after, that anybody in either of these two school districts would involuntarily lose a job because of the merger. I'm not saying that somebody doesn't get let go because they're not doing their job, whatever, but that because of the merger, I'd be shocked if anybody currently working in the two districts loses their job. And again, those are the connections that are starting to come together. What's the result of combining those classes that we talked about in the second week? What's the result of keeping 5 elementary buildings open? That's connected to staff as well. What does that attrition table mean in terms of the probability that there are going to be vacancies when you're ready to reduce? All of those connections are starting to come together. And I think this is pretty accurate in terms of what we can project.
Alan, we have a hand up again. Amanda has a hand up.
Just to clarify, Alan, so with the secondary positions, you're saying if, let's say it was an English teacher and there wasn't an English position available, the thought could be that that person would potentially be kept on staff to teach outside of their certification area? Is that?
No, they might keep, they might add a couple of electives for the teacher to teach something different. They might maintain class sizes a little smaller. They might create something in the English department that would accommodate 5 or 6 periods, whatever it turns out to be. But no, teacher really can't teach outside their area of certification. So it would be creating enough English periods to fill the teacher's job.
To employ that person within their certification area.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
We also have a comment in the chat section, Alan.
Okay.
Mr. Boucher says 1 teacher retiring or leaving does not allow 3 in that department to be hired.
I don't understand that.
John, did you want to maybe clarify that comment?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Through attrition, we looked at the attrition rates in South Glens Falls. If you have 1 or 2 people, you're not going to be able to take the 3 or 4 from Fort Edward in that department and move them over. 2 spots does not allow that, especially when you said you're going to cut sections in each discipline. But this doesn't make sense.
Are you pointing to one of the tables, John? I'm not.
Yeah, well, yeah, the attrition table again.
Okay, hold on a
But
sec.
then your attrition lines
Okay,
for the people leaving in, let's say, English or social studies or whatever, that does not match up to the number of people either in Fort Edward or on the preferred list that would be looking for jobs if this was to happen. The mathematics doesn't work out. There would have to be a lot more people leaving South Glens Falls in order to
So-
make that happen.
Right, so I'm not sure who's talking, but this is Christine from South Glens Falls. And one of the things I can tell you that has been a practice for us for a number of years is we actually have an anticipation each year of how many retirements we're going to have. Because by February 1st, our teachers have to tell us who's retiring, but also there's an incentive, an insurance incentive to retire when you're first eligible. I took a look at this slide again in a different way because the word attrition to me means that we're doing something. But I mean, every year consistently for the next at least 3 years, we would have 6 to 8 people that could retire. Again, I didn't go all the way out because probably something happened with COVID and I got sidetracked. But I did go out enough just to see if what he was saying was somewhat accurate. So, that's just a little side note of thinking forward as opposed to just backwards.
yeah, I think I understand what you're saying now. I got it. And I'm sure you're right. I don't think you can go at the detail level of position by position in each secondary discipline. I think you can do it at the elementary level. We've accounted, I think, for all of the Fort Edward elementary teachers and specials that would be at the elementary level. Are you hearing me? I'm getting a sign
Yeah.
saying my connection's unstable. Am I still okay?
Yes.
admittedly, you cannot go position by position and guarantee that's going to happen. I understand that comment. I would agree with that comment. I think you have to go back to that statement of assurances that says, understanding that in January of 2021, we don't know exactly what the staffing is going to look like in July of 2022, but we've got a statement of assurances that talks about employing as many people as possible and using attrition, where that's not possible. Now,
Right, and that's the main difference between an annexation and the merger is you don't have to hire the teachers at Fort Edward. And that's how you make it really makes it better for South Glens Falls without having to hire all that staff, because otherwise you're not really gaining a heck of a lot.
well, I'm not sure I agree with that. The statement of assurances says that they will employ as many people as possible. That's both districts. That's not, again, it's not just the South Glens Falls teachers. That's all the teachers, employ as many people as possible. That's where we're starting. And they come over with all of their years of service. So what I do agree with is that we cannot tonight predict exactly what the staffing is going to look like in July of 22. I agree with that. We may be off by an English teacher, my example. We may be off by a music position. But knowing that we cannot model that in 2022, it seems to me that we've got to look at some history about, by and large, does this approach work? And then we've got to, I think, trust that a Board of Education is going to live up to their statement of assurance, saying they're going to try to keep everybody on they possibly can. I don't know how we go much beyond that. And I agree, it's difficult to go exactly every position by position at the secondary level.
And Alan, you're also saying that some of those positions we automatically have to fill in order to run the two school, like let's use middle school as an example. In order to bring the middle school students over, the staffing right now at South Glens Falls doesn't warrant that. So some of the current teachers at Fort Edward would automatically go into positions. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. Yeah, I mean, let me put it another way. If for those people who are on a preferred eligible list, a Pell list, I would think the probability of them being recalled would probably be greater if there is a merger than if there isn't. I don't know. It's just my look at the data and just projecting, or just more positions, more people leaving. And if you've got rights to those jobs, I would think your chances would be greater.
So there's a question from Nelson Chase in the chat. Is there any way to project out retirements for both districts to quantify Alan's very likely probability statement? And continues on with a statement that I would argue that modeling staffing needs is absolutely essential at this point. So the question, I guess, would be, is there, as part of the study, do you project out retirements for districts, or is that not part of the process? Even though Christine and I did have a conversation about that last week.
Yeah, we don't do it as part of the study. I mean, we used to do that, and we found out that it was not terribly accurate, because for us to try to predict people's retirement based on age, we found out didn't work well. The factors that influence that from one district to another can be very different. So no, we do not as part of the study. But I think, Christine, that's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah. So I mean, just as a common practice in South Glens Falls, we project out, not necessarily because of the study, but that's our norm, is that's what we do. Just so that way, if we have to reallocate staffing, we do it that way through retirements, or if we have to reduce, we try to do it that way as well, knowing if there's going to be a bad budget season or something like that.
And then I just wanted to provide an answer to Amanda's earlier question. And I think Mary Ann might have followed about the Pell list. So I did find the response I received from the Fort Edward School District's attorney saying that the the Pell list that currently exists in Fort Edward becomes the property of the South Glens Falls School District if an annexation occurs. So I did that. I did have that in writing from them in my email, as I had suspected. They take all the employees, and the people on the Pell list are considered employees, is what it says.
Thanks, Dan. So you said, I just want to make sure I have the terminology correct. You said it does become the property of the South Glens Falls District, correct?
That is the opinion of the school's legal firm. Yes,
Okay.
that's what
And
they wrote.
Christine, you said you currently have no Pell list for elementary, secondary, nothing, right? Okay. Just the only comment that I have that I think part of what makes this difficult for current staff members, community members of Fort Edward and stuff is that the statement of assurance is, like we talked about, I think early on, maybe even in the first meeting, is that they're not legally binding, and they look nice, they sound good. I trust that people would, if things were to move forward, that people would try to uphold those. But bottom line, we're in times that we've never been in before. I mean, there could be mass exits of people ready to retire as soon as they can. Then you also have people who might hold on longer because they need the income. And, there is just nothing. It's an assurance. It's not a guarantee. It's not legally binding. And I think that's the piece where people get the hesitation from.
I can tell you, Amanda, that when we met with our board presidents, you have to remember these are elected positions. And so even though it's a statement of assurance that's non-binding, if a board of ed puts something out there and then kind of reneged on it, it doesn't look good in the eyes of our community. So I know that, speaking for my Board of Education, they took that very seriously because they had to, know that they had to back that and stand firm to that when they had that conversation. And they always like to be as honest as possible with those things. So, again, my board's not here, but I can speak for them in that sense that, we did review all of those things with our boards.
Anything else? Okay, so as I said, in addition to our discussion about staffing, there is this theme about connections coming together. Hopefully, you're seeing pieces from previous meetings come together and take on additional meaning. So what we would like you to do, because as Deb talked at the beginning, we have 5 content meetings with the committee, and tonight is going to be the 4th one. We have only one other content meeting scheduled, and that meeting is in February, dealing with finances, where even more connections are going to be made. But then the next time we're going to meet is to review the draft report. So what we have put together for tonight is that we have asked if you would spend some time in small groups, again, dealing with, Christine, if you can just push the slides ahead a few for us. One more. Whoops, back one. There. What we'd like you to do for us as we prepare for the last meeting and as we start preparing the draft final report is to answer some questions for us that you see at the bottom of this slide. So this conversation is really all about trying to distill down some of the key points of this study. Somebody said it earlier, this is going to be a 100-page document. When we meet with you in April, we're going to talk about a draft report that's going to try to distill that document down into an hour PowerPoint. If we wanted to distill that hour PowerPoint even farther, what we've done here is to come up with the single biggest or two single biggest takeaways from each of the chapters that we've talked about in our first 5 meetings. So let me just go through them. Our first meeting, Deb talked largely about enrollment, and it's been pretty clear that the enrollments in both districts have declined over the past 6 or 7 years. They're probably going to continue to decline. We've got some conversation that says, wait a minute, Saratoga is really growing. We may not be declining. Let's just agree that for conversation purposes tonight, we all agree we're not going to have a big increase in the number of students. Even if it stays the same or goes down a little bit, that's kind of the enrollment picture. From a program standpoint, if there is a merger, there will be more courses, athletics, and extracurricular options for students. At the same time, in some areas, if there's a merger, these additional options will create additional competition. Facilities, pretty straightforward. Keep the Fort Edward building open as an elementary school, keep the 4 South Glens Falls elementary schools open, and the South Glens Falls Middle School and High School house the rest of the students. Transportation, everybody who's eligible for transportation gets transported. Some students are going to have a longer bus run than they have currently. Actually, some students don't get transported now, but those that will, some may have a longer run, but everybody who wants transportation, we'll assume would get it. And then staffing, we've said tonight, we're going to be looking at an expense of about $280,000 to level up the salary schedules, the salaries for the Fort Edward teachers to the South Glens Falls schedules, but that we are going to save through some teaching positions and a superintendent position about $1.2 million a year, the financial implications for staffing. So these 5 huge PowerPoints that we've shared with you for the last 5 meetings, we boiled down to 5 bullets just for conversation tonight. What we'd like you to do is to go into small groups. I think we're going to do about 5 of them. And we'd like you to take 15 minutes. We'd like to ask you to respond to the 3 questions on here. Have someone record the responses so that Deb and or I can have those. And then so we can put them in the notes, and then be ready to report your results to the committee. So kind of typical small group work. And what we're going to ask you are these 3 bullets. What of those 5 bullets up above, what are the most important ones and why? Of the 5 bullets above, which ones are a concern to you and why? And then the 3rd bullet, about those 5 bullets up above, what other information do you need to understand the implications of any of them a little bit better? So small groups, 3 questions, get a recorder, be ready to report out. We're going to go 15 minutes in this small group. And then Christine is going to check at the end of 15 minutes to see if you need more time. If we need to add 5 minutes, we will. But we'd like you to kind of shoot towards 15 minutes and then be ready to come back and report out the results of your discussions. So questions about this work?
So when I break you onto rooms, you're going to see something pop up on your screen. You just click the button to go to the room. I do have in almost every room except for breakout room 1 administrator assigned to it, just so that way if you have questions or they can text me and I can ask Alan or Deb for you. So that way you can still communicate with all of us. And I think Missy, you're in breakout room 1. So I know you have my number, so you can always do that as well. So with that said, I am opening the rooms now.
And why don't we go till 7:50? That's 16 minutes. 7:50, we'll be back. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to mute myself from here for a few minutes and jump on a vaccination webinar. So I'll be back in about 10 minutes.
Can you hear me, Deb?
We're still on the live stream.
Okay. Can you, Monica, can you hear me?
Yes.
Deb is having trouble. Is there any way that you can re-hook her in or do something to give her a chance? She's not hearing anything.
If you leave the meeting and come back, I can let you in.
All right, let me tell her to do that. She's got the problem, okay? I will call her right now and tell her to do that. Okay?
Got it. Yep.
Okay.
You might want to mute. Okay, please stay out of my video. Just leave it there. Thank you.
Monica? She can't do that. She can't get to the screen to even kick herself off. Can you kick her out and then bring her back?
Yes, I think so. We'll see what happens.
Give it a shot. Because she's nowhere. So
All right, I can remove her and then
Okay.
just come back in.
she says that she can hear us now.
But she's out of the meeting. Maybe
just-
she sent that before I removed her.
She's trying to get in again now, she said.
Okay, yep, I see her in the room.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Okay, great.
Yeah, I could hear you before, actually, but I lost every bit of the Zoom screen or any of the controls or anything. All I could do was hear you. I had the screen just that was showing that said launch meeting. It was very weird.
Well, we're glad you're back.
Thank you for kicking me out so I can.
I have to mute. I have a loud household.
I got to most groups, Alan, before the time ran out, and it did sound like they were kind of wrapping some things up.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone feels they definitely need more time. We can send people back or anything like that.
Could we possibly get just a couple more minutes? We were right in the middle of a conversation in our group. Is
My-
that possible or no?
My group was as well. I think if we could
Yeah.
can we have like, I could do it in 4 minutes.
I'll give you 5, Dan.
It's like name that tune, right? We can do it in
Okay.
4 minutes.
It's the same room, so you're just I'm gonna go right back and open them up.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Christine?
Yep.
On the attendance, I got everybody here except the 2 that we didn't think were coming.
That's what I thought. Yep.
Okay. All right. So you don't have to worry about it then. We can take it from there.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All
Did you
right.
give everybody else more time, Christine, or what?
I'm sorry.
I said, did you give everybody else more time?
I know. I don't know what's going on.
Do they even have an option to stay longer? How do they
That's
do
right. No. Dan, was my 5 minutes enough for you, or I just want to make sure you're happy.
You know me, I'm always happy.
Oh, I know, Dan. I know. Yep.
We were good. We were close at the end, but we're in good shape.
Okay. So do we have everyone back, Christine?
Yep.
Okay. Volunteer group to go first?
Go first, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
So a couple of things kind of rose to the top in our group, and so it was more theme-based. For us, most of the conversation really focused around programs and transportation, and also on the facility, specifically the elementary school in Fort Edward. So the majority of our conversation was focused on the opportunities that Fort Edward students would have to participate in extracurriculars in relation to transportation into the evening after especially sporting events. There is a concern that is a big issue, and that there's going to be an equity piece for students who live in Fort Edward, that there will certainly be kids that will be able to find rides and get transportation, but that there will be a not insignificant group of students that may miss out because they won't be able to participate in those activities because they won't be able to get transportation home. So that was something that got talked about quite a bit. Fort Edward is a large walking district, and so that would be a big change for them. And then the other discussion that we talked about was, again, we came back to the topic of the elementary school, and after that 5-year assurance, if the elementary school had to close because of sections, it's really at the center of the village, and it's something that's used by the community in a number of different ways, including for rec programs and things like that. And what does it look like if that building is owned by South Glens Falls and it's not being used for instruction? Is it something that would still be able to be utilized by the community? One of our group members talked about another building that's closed in the village that has really become kind of a center for broken windows and vandalism, and there's some concerns about that as well. And then the topic, obviously, of staffing came up just in as staffing would, that there's always going to be concerns that while the predictions are positive, what is that going to look like, especially for support staff? So those were the themes that really came up in our group and that we spend the most amount of time talking about.
What are the concerns for the support staff?
Just that are people, are we really going to be able to keep on as many people as
Positions,
we talked about?
got it. Okay.
Right.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Tim, who'd like to go next?
I can go next. I think we had a kind of a similar pattern. We kind of melted questions 1 and 2 together because, obviously I think the important items are the ones that were also concerning. So the staffing part came up, the 280,000, the level up, I think as Nelson called it, for the 44 staff currently listed. Is that the number for them, or is it more the 35 staff? And, sharing out that obviously the Fort Edward faculty isn't an enormous group. There's only 9 teachers that teach the sum total of all classes in the 4 core areas. So if there's a secondary reduction of 7 people, that's a lot, as an example from the core. And when it all shakes out, the idea that everyone is going to essentially be able to keep a job, especially in this unpredictable fiscal climate that COVID has created for all of us. But that was the ability to actually have that happen in all of this was a concern. Facilities, that was something like Tim said, the ability to keep a building open with just 150 kids in it, the fiscal feasibility of that. The concern about basing things off of enrollment projections, when we know the farther we go out, the less reliable those are. People are just doing their best. And that same thing, transportation, some concerns about, distance and time as related to sports and just general amount of time kids end up on a bus, and how enjoyable riding a school bus in May for an hour can be for everybody involved. The only other thing that I thought that I would add in my group, if I'm forgetting anything, please say so, was there was one of the things that I think we came back to, and why Amanda asked for a little bit more time was I think as a room, the feeling was expressed that we've not had a ton of opportunity as a group to talk to one another and just absorb information. And that feels like I don't know if it's a missed opportunity, but an important piece of just hearing from one another on a person-to-person level to get a better understanding where each of our given populations is coming from, so we can get a better understanding. If this goes forward, what are those things on an individual level that we need to be aware of from each of the given sides? Especially, I think largely because obviously our Fort Edward contingency here is very passionate about that side of things, and South Glens Falls focus a whole have been kind of largely quieter as we listen. And I think the reality of this isn't a merger. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm using the term right, but I think an absorption, and those manifest for each of our populations in very different ways. So the ability for us, those last 5 minutes I actually thought were great for us to just be able to kind of talk about that as as we're each experiencing it. So that was, I think, one of the concerns that was raised, the lack of opportunity. We absorb a lot listening to Alan and Deb present, and it's a lot of information, but to be able to talk to one another on the side. Amanda, do you think I articulated that all right?
Yes, very good. Just
Okay.
a missed opportunity with regards to the reality of functioning in the COVID world. Some conversations that maybe would happen after in-person meetings of for example, Brian from South Glens Falls was in the group, and I said, hey, what's your role? And then I said, let's go off script. Let's just have a conversation. Let's just talk. Who are we and what are we about? And what are we hearing of conversation, of concerns, of discussion? It was just nice to have those talks, and we haven't really been able to have those throughout. It's been tricky because of the reality of the pandemic.
Thank you, Pete and Amanda. Next.
Want me to jump in? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So our group, we jumped around a little bit. I tried to put it in buckets, somewhat successfully, but not really. So I think what's important is, the most important thing that came up is that students need to get what they need no matter what the school configuration is. And that was mentioned in a couple of different ways. The word opportunity and options were both used, but I'll paraphrase it by saying, no matter the school configuration, students need to get what they need to get. We don't want any student to receive anything less for opportunities or options that they are receiving right now, whether that be a South Glens Falls or a Fort Edward student. A couple of conversations in all three buckets about class size, and wondering about hearing more about options for possibly maintaining class sizes or even reducing class sizes if the annexation happens, through keeping some additional teachers on. Along that same line, there was a question about, is there any information that can be shared about how many aides and assistants are in the classrooms, as that overall does impact student to teacher ratio, although it's not teacher, student to staff member ratio, I should say. So that was on there. Conversation about Fort Edward students being in a larger fishbowl. Art, I think, volunteered to let everybody live or drive them all back and forth if they had to stay after school. But he made a very nice comment that, if something were to happen and our students were there, if the annexation goes through, that they'd be welcome with open arms, and they really work hard, he being one of the members on the faculty, to make it happen for kids, which is obviously the same thing that our folks here at Fort Edward do, and I'm sure everyone knows that. Concern about young students walking to school, that concern exists now. Just wondering how that manifests or looks in South Glens Falls based on their policies and procedures. And concern about the staffing, and again, about how some Fort Edward folks will be displaced, including all staff types, from the cleaners up through the admin. How sure are we about some of those assumptions that are being made right now? Due to extracurricular activities, sports, as well as those beyond sports, a concern about how viable are the programs that are occurring in Fort Edward right now, knowing that there's some merging with other school districts to make those happen, and how that might be affected by the annexation for all students involved, both the South Glens Falls and the Fort Edward students. I think that hit the high points. I didn't read it verbatim.
Dan, I can comment on one of the things there about transportation or about walking at the elementary level. Our walking zone is only a half a mile. So we have, only very small neighborhoods of students walking to a few of our buildings. After a half a mile, we have to pick them up.
And so I'll follow up, Chris. So the question kind of was, do you really let kindergartners walk to school? Like if you see a kindergartner walking a half a mile, do they have to be with a parent? And the reason it was asked, because I had misspoke, really those kids aren't walking here by themselves. They're either with an older sibling, or they're with a parent, or they're being dropped off by a parent. Kindergartners aren't walking here on their own.
Our kindergartners don't walk at all, and they actually get picked up at the door.
Right. I was going to add that as well. Okay.
Yeah, and I knew that. So I would say, same question, first grader. Does a first grader walk a half a mile by themselves, or are they normally somebody with them?
I would say that there's normally somebody with them, but I mean, our walking is very small.
Okay.
At the 5 level.
Thank you.
It's very small.
I can say just from dropping my daughter off at Tanglewood, there's usually parents with all the parents or grandparents walking the younger students right to the stop sign or where they switch off. But that's just observation.
So
Dan,
anything above kindergarten, you're saying that if they're within a half mile, they can walk by themselves?
No, all kindergartners are bused in South, I believe, Christine, right? They're all bused.
Right,
no
I
matter
said
how
above
far away.
kindergarten. Above the kindergarten level. If they're within a half mile, they can walk by themselves. First, second, third, fourth, doesn't matter.
Yep, it's a parent choice,
Okay.
but like I say to you, right now, there's really only 2 elementary schools that have, there's 3, but there's a lot of caveats to our transportation because of, there's got to be safe roads. We've tried to have sidewalks, and so on and so forth. So we definitely, our policy errs more on busing than walking. So some of these questions that you're asking are hard to kind of quantify because, again, I would be like Matt with observational pieces. For the most part, somebody's usually walking with them, but that's not, we don't force them to, but that's just the norm because we have so few.
Dan, I did not get your last point about extracurricular activities. I heard how viable, but I didn't really understand what you were saying. You're muted.
I tried to shut myself up. So just a conversation about how there's a concern of how viable Fort Edward extracurricular activities are going forward without annexation. But also that the conversation about extracurriculars, and again, I'm paraphrasing, seem to be mostly centered around sports and maybe some more conversation about the other opportunities outside of athletics for all the children.
Thank you. Okay. Who wants to go next?
I think I can go. Can you hear me all right?
Who was talking?
This is Kevin Futrell.
Gotcha. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. And similar to everyone else, about the opportunities was, very attractive. And really it, I think we agree that it happens to both sides. Fort Edward, of course, we'll see a lot more electives, a lot more clubs and sports, et cetera. But even South Glens Falls would benefit from it, because with declining enrollment, it'll stave off cuts to a lot of those things, down the road. The concern, of course, is the flip side of it. Especially from the Fort Edward side of view, going back to sports, would my kid make the team, etc. The one question that came up, Alan, is when you were talking about all the savings that we would get through cuts and attrition, etc., but yet we would still have all of these increased staff available. It seemed contradictory that we would be able to keep all of this staff, nobody would be cut, we'd bring all the people back from the preferred eligibility list, and yet also save money on taxes. So just throwing that out there. The other question that was kind of approached is, what happens if we don't merge? What does the future hold? And I think that would be for both sides, really.
Okay. Anything
Other
else,
than that,
Ken?
everything else was kind of addressed with other groups.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And our last group was one more? That's 4, right?
Yes, Alan, this is Missy Smith. We were group 1.
Okay, thanks, Missy.
So under the most important items for us, one of them was the lunch program, which wasn't really mentioned much in any of the slides, although the question was emailed and the response also emailed. Another most important item was transportation for the extracurriculars, and more specifically, a concern that in South Glens Falls at the secondary level, there isn't enough opportunity after school. We only have the 3 days a week, 30 minutes, and they get more than that currently at Fort Edward. Another most important item was elementary students in Fort Edward. Will it be only the Fort Edward students at the elementary? Will South Glens Falls students be moved to Fort Edward? And then, of course, the class size for those elementary students. And then transportation also a most important item for adding time to students' commutes, which in South Glens Falls, some of those commutes are already considered to be lengthy. What concerns us? We had a couple of comments about, again, transportation, amount of time on busing, and class sizes at the elementary level, specifically the numbers in South Glens Falls being too high compared to what Fort Edward is used to. And if I'm going too fast, just tell me to stop.
No, got it.
What additional information is needed? Our group felt, again, if students from Fort Edward Elementary are going to be moved to South Glens Falls, what criteria would be used? Would there be some more conversation or information given on which students would need to move over to a South Glens Falls Elementary, which the feeling was that would be a very difficult thing. Also, additional information needed on the building in Fort Edward, which has also been discussed. And then another concern was the enrollment projection numbers. There seems to be some disagreement about the numbers declining as much as has been stated, and if some of the numbers are off in other areas. And then just final observation, small group discussion. I personally think is tremendously helpful. I think sometimes South Glens Falls is seen as kind of a bigger, faceless, get lost in the crowd kind of place, and being able to have some conversations one-on-one, I think helps everybody's comfort level a little bit. And that was it.
Okay, Missy, thank you. Right, that's it, right? There are 5 groups. Anybody that didn't get covered in those 5 reports?
Ellen, I just wanted to note that there's a couple of groups that have shared their notes with us, so we do have those. And if
Great.
others want to do that, that's great as well.
That would be appreciated. Okay, as you've been sitting here listening to the reports, what else came to your mind that you would like to share with the group before we wrap things up tonight? Any other comments or questions?
Can I add, sorry.
Mary Ann, why don't you go first?
All right, I mentioned this in our group, and I don't know that it got put down on our notes, but it was mentioned by another group, so I just wanted to have that point heard. But as far as opportunities, I feel like at Fort Edward, our students are given a lot of opportunities academically. It doesn't look like there's a lot of options because the options are what they asked for. We go out and get it through distance learning or through other programs. So while it might look like we only have 5 electives, it's because those are the 5 that students have asked for. So that's why we have those 5. We don't have 20 because that's not doable with our, our number of students wouldn't allocate to, or wouldn't, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but we wouldn't have that many because we don't have that many students. But our students do have the opportunities to get a lot of classes that they want.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Someone else wanted to...
Yeah, it's Tim. There was a comment over in the chat. It says from Carrie Dool in South Glens Falls, food service was not discussed. We are not figured into the staffing budget. So I don't know if there was some clarification on how food services talked about in regard to staffing.
Yeah, let me jump in here. We don't focus a lot on the food service staffing because it is not part of the general fund budget. It has its own separate budget and revenue stream and is accounted for separately. Not to minimize the importance of that department. As you saw in my response, Fort Edward has had to have some subsidization of their program. They're hoping that changes, but South Glens Falls has not. They run a very efficient and effective food service program. But the reason we don't talk about it here is that because it's a whole different fund, not to get into the technical side, but the general operating fund where virtually everybody else in the district works is an A fund. That's a C fund. That's why we don't talk about it a whole lot.
Thanks, Tim.
I just wanted to add something that I heard from another chat about the enrollment projections being wrong or being too small. I think what a lot of people are looking at is they're saying, well, Saratoga County is growing. That's absolutely correct, but it's from Wilton South. It's not from Wilton North. And when we're looking at South Glens Falls, most of what they're looking at as far as growth is going to be businesses, which is great for revenue stream, but doesn't mean that much for having more students. So I think that's something important to look at.
Thank you, Elaine. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say, Alan and Deb, I do appreciate, I noticed on the small group discussion slide that the terminology does say options. And I know it's something small, but as you know, it's something big to me. So I do appreciate the that detail. And I was just curious if you guys would be able to at some point gather, I'm curious across New York State, what other, I know there's been a lot of districts that have engaged in studies such as this, but which districts have gone through with full annexation? I know the one up north was a centralization. So I'm not I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in the annexation. Just curious, within the last, I don't know, 10 years maybe, just curious how many districts have actually undergone this full process. If that's possible to be shared, I'm just kind of curious about that.
Okay, see if we can find out. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Anything else on the chats, Dan or Christine? That's it. We're clear. Okay. Okay, so we're going to call it a night then. Our next meeting is Monday, February 22nd. We are planning to be at Tanglewood in South Glens Falls. If we are in person, obviously, if we're remote, whatever. You know that Deb is going to be remote in February, but if the group decides to meet in person, I will be there. And I'll be there for the tour, and I'll be there to hang around afterwards. So if we meet as a group, I will be there, and Deb will do the presentation remotely. She really does the finance piece. So again, we're still on target. Everything is going okay. Monica and Christine and Dan, thank you for your assistance technically. Frankly, I think it's really pretty great. These meetings come off pretty well remotely without a hitch. And that means that somebody is putting it together and getting us in and out of small groups, and it seems to be working very well. And we do appreciate the work that you have done to make this come off well. Given the circumstances, frankly, I think these things are going very well. So thank you for that. Okay. Anything else? Last chance, final comments. Deb?
I'm all set here. Thank you, everybody, for everything.
Okay.
Shall we
All
talk
right.
about
We look forward to seeing you again in February. Obviously, we'll let you know what's going on. Okay.
Alan, shall we talk about your sweater?
My sweater. Can I go watch the game, please? I'm an Ohio State fan, and they are playing a football game tonight, so that's where I'm headed. But I recorded it, so I was happy to spend as much time as was necessary with you all.
Oh, wait, Alan, I got one more question. No.
Okay.
Go watch the game.
What?
Go watch the game. I'm just messing with you.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you in February.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Christine, could you? I think you're muted.
It's been a long day. Monica, you're gonna turn off the live stream and the recording, correct? And it
Yes,
will.
can you make me the host again, though?
Yes,
have
I
to be
would
the
love
host.
to.
I'll stop the recording now.